Okay, well, good morning and welcome to the Cyber Liability Insurance webinar hosted by Breach Secure Now. We are thrilled to have you join us for an exclusive opportunity to reveal how cyber liability insurance can not only reduce the risk of a breach, but also minimize its impacts. Today, we'll focus on the powerful foundation for building human-centric cybersecurity solutions and discuss the market's upcoming considerations and positions on how to meet and exceed the fundamental components of an MSP solution stack. So please feel free to join the conversation and ask questions in the chat throughout the webinar. We will reserve some time at the end for that participation. So our presenter today is Art Gross, a wildly experienced and knowledgeable MSP owner, CEO of Breach Secure Now, and founder of a cyber liability insurance provider. Art knows all of the aspects of all of those businesses and how they impact one another. So please welcome Art Gross.
All right, Tracy, thank you. Got a little overwhelmed when you started listing all the things that I'm doing. So I am Art Gross. I am the CEO of Breach Secure Now. Also the CEO of Inskyber, which is an insurance broker. All right. So as Tracy said, I'm also an MSP owner. I do a lot in the MSP space. So I bring a unique perspective as an MSP, as a CEO of a cybersecurity company, and also as an insurance broker. And I think today it's going to be a very interesting session, and I'm looking forward to it. And as it says, you know, I am a big Penn State fan, so that I always like to mention that. And that is a picture of me in Beaver Stadium for all that know Penn State. Let's talk about Breach Secure Now. If you don't know what Breach Secure Now is, we are the channel leader in cybersecurity awareness, human-centric security. Founded Breach Secure Now, BSN, as you may refer to it as, in 2014. And we focus on human security, employee training, simulated phishing, risk assessments, and HIPAA compliance and other types of compliance. And again, built by an MSP for MSPs. So, you know, we have 2,500 partners and it's growing and exciting to partner with all the MSPs. And I think it really plays into insurance because you're going to see the why human security is so important in cyber liability insurance. Inskyber, you may or you may not have heard about Inskyber. It is a cyber insurance broker. Actually, it's an insurance broker. We focus on tech insurance for MSPs and their clients. And again, you know, trying to take the experience of MSPs and the help that they need in making sure that they're properly insured and their clients are insured, and very, very happy to be able to talk about Inskyber. My partner is Tom Wozbowski, very popular in insurance, very very knowledgeable. I believe Tom is on the line, although I think he was having some trouble. Tom, are you here? I'm gonna assume he's not. So he will join us in a few minutes once he connects with us. But Tom will offer a unique perspective on insurance. I'm going to go through some slides, and at the end we're going to have a conversation, Tom and I, question and answer. And then, as Tracy said before, if you have specific questions, put it into the chat, and we'll answer those questions as well. All right, so let's jump in. This is an interesting chart right here, and we all know that breaches are skyrocketing. You can't read the news without seeing that there are more and more breaches. One of the global insurance brokers, Willis Towers Watson, they did a study and they found that 66% of all insurance claims that they dealt with were because of employee negligence, employee mistakes. And if you add social engineering, which is another 3%, you're almost at 70%, right? The majority of breaches are caused by human mistakes. And I think that's very eye-opening. You know, we hear about ransomware, we hear about business interruption, but most of those breaches happen because an employee, you know, makes a mistake, is socially engineered, is tricked, is phished. So, you know, when we think about cyber insurance, it's very important to understand why, why human security and focusing on employees are so important. And you're going to see that from the carriers as well. They understand this, and they are very tuned into how do we reduce risk and looking at an employee risk that is the leading cause of breaches. So, you know, let's just talk about why companies need cyber liability insurance. You know, it obviously helps reduce the impact of a breach. If breaches are expensive, they could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, and cyber liability insurance or cyber insurance will help offset some of those costs. And I believe it's a critical part of business insurance. It is, you really can't run a business these days without having cyber insurance. It's too risky. There's just too much liability. There's too much unknown, and there's too much money in the economy going after organizations. And every organization, whether the MSPs, small businesses, large organizations, they all have to have cyber insurance. And it protects and it offsets some of the financial costs due to social engineering, ransomware, business email compromise. And I think that's what's really important. You know, we talk about ransomware a lot, but business email compromise and financial fraud is huge. And so, you know, if your business is a victim of business email compromise or financial fraud, you're going to need insurance to offset some of that financial loss. The other pieces are data breaches are expensive, and privacy investigation lawsuits become very expensive, and ransomware could stop your business from functioning, and you would need some financial relief for income loss. So cyber liability insurance covers all of that. And Tom, I think you joined us. Would you agree that all businesses need cyber liability insurance?
I think it's part of your whole stack now. We talk to our MSPs and selling a stack to a SMB, but for us in the insurance world, it's part of the stack. Where it wasn't, like it slowly came on from 2009 is when we started this journey, right? And cyber came there, and it's first with healthcare. But now we talk about it with everybody, whether you're a contractor. What's the exposure of a general contractor for cyber insurance? It's there, and for contracts, you need it. So it's part of our selling stack that we go in.
Yep, absolutely. And and really the reason it is really important, the thing that most businesses don't understand, and maybe many MSPs don't really understand, is breaches are chaotic. I mean, they're stressful. You're forced to make decisions based on information that you don't know. You're forced to do things that you've not done before, like negotiate with criminals and pay cryptocurrency and worry about your business. And the problem is, if you're involved in a breach, you go to the dark side right away. You go to the worst case scenario. I'm going to lose my business. I'm an employee who causes the breach they're worried about getting fired. Are you going to lose customers? You're going to lose revenue, or you're not going to be able to grow. All of these things happen at the same time that you're thrown into, okay, we got to get the business back up and running. We got to move forward, but you also have to preserve the evidence. You can't just reload servers and reload desktops, because some of that forensics, some of that evidence is really important, and that will minimize some of the impact later on. So, one of the big pieces, people think of insurance as a financial tool, right? That, okay, if we fall for ransomware, it'll help offset the cost of ransomware or financial fraud. But I actually think it is the breach response vendors and help that is even more important than the financial help. Because as I said, you're going to, if you're a business owner, you're going to have to make decisions on things that you've never had to deal with before. And one of the things that come with cyber liability insurance is these vetted vendors and immediate response or very rapid response. And usually it's a breach coach, and that could be a law firm that is very familiar with breach response and remediation. It could be forensics. And again, you want to know who of your customers or your vendors or your employees have been impacted, because that's going to tell how much this breach is going to cost in the future when you have to do a breach notification or deal with any regulatory issues. You'll want legal counsel who is familiar with data breaches. What do we do? What do we say? What don't we say? When we're writing breach notification letters, what do we actually say in that? So these are all things that most businesses have no idea what to do. That's why it's really good to have the these expert vendors. And again, the lost revenue. If you're a ransomware victim and you can't collect money for 2 weeks, a cyber liability insurance policy will help you with that. And obviously with regulatory issues, if you're a healthcare organization, you have to worry about HIPAA. If you have customers in New York or California or Florida, Texas, or anywhere, you have regulatory issues at the state level as well. So cyber liability insurance will help with all of that. And so we've had a changing landscape over the last 3 years, and I think COVID really has sped up this exponential rise in claims. And we're seeing breaches. Maybe it's work from home, maybe it's all of the money that has been put into the economy, but breaches are just on the rise, and all those claims are going into cyber liability insurance carriers, and they're paying a lot more in claims than they were 5 years ago. And what we saw last year was increasing insurance premiums, exponential, and well, I don't know if it's exponential, but rapidly, maybe doubling of some of those premiums. And we're seeing it slow down. And Tom, you and I will talk about this a little later, but it's still going up. And I think it's starting to regulate, but we'll drive into that a little more in terms of the premiums. But what we're also seeing is reduced coverage and greater sublimits. You may have $1 million policy, $2 million policy, but it only covers $500,000 of ransomware, $250,000 of ransomware. It may only cover $50,000 or $100,000 of social engineering or business email compromise. So while insurance premiums are going up, the coverage is actually going down, and the shared amount with a client and the carrier is going up. So the carrier who used to pay the majority of it is now sharing those costs with clients and organizations. We're also seeing carriers exit the market. We saw this for MSPs. A lot of carriers don't want anything to do with MSPs. They realize that there's risk. If an MSP is breached, it's very easy to breach all of their clients. Healthcare, we see them being attacked. There's carriers that are moving away from that market. So, it is a massively changing landscape from just a few years ago. And one of the biggest pieces, and maybe this is good, I actually think it is good, is that carriers are requiring significant cybersecurity safeguards. They're basically saying, we're not going to insure you unless you share that risk with us, that you help us lower that risk by implementing cyber insurance. And they're no longer insuring everyone, pretty much blindly like they were doing years ago. Now they want to see an overall cyber insurance security stack, and we're going to drill into this a lot, but they want to see spam filters and multi-factor authentication and training and phishing and endpoint protection and email encryption and laptop encryption, password management, backup and recovery. So insurance carriers are requiring that organizations make sure that they're helping to lower that risk. It's very interesting because insurance questionnaires, a few years ago, an insurance questionnaire may be 6 questions. Do you have a, antivirus, you have a firewall, are you backing up your data, a few other questions, and you can get insurance. Now these insurance questionnaires are 60 questions, 70 questions. It used to be 1 page, now they're 15 pages. And they start to look like a security risk assessment, where you're looking at the technical controls, you're looking at administrative controls, you're looking at physical controls. The insurance carriers want to make is doing everything they can to lower the risk of a data breach. And in Skyber, Tom and I, we went through the top 10 questionnaires and top 10 carriers. You're looking at Beasley and Brit and Tokyo Marine and Travelers, and it was interesting. Every single carrier asked for different safeguards and asked questions, but there was some an overall trend. Security awareness training, focusing on employees. 100% of the carriers wanted to make sure that organizations were focusing on human security and employee security. 50% wanted to know about phishing. Are you phishing employees? Antivirus, 100%. EDR, 50% of that. So not only the antivirus, but we want to see, endpoint detection and response. Are you securing remote access? 60%. What's interesting is data backup, 100%. Data recovery, and how long is it going to take you to recover? Okay, you're backing up your data, you're recovering, but can you recover in 4 hours, 6 hours, a week? And they started to drive into that. And then the other piece is, have you had a previous event, security event? Do you put claims in? Because that's all going to affect your premium. So, what's interesting is that you may, all those questions, not everyone is required to get insurance, all right? And some will just impact your premium. So if you aren't doing something, that you still may be insured, but your premium is going to be higher. If you've had previous breaches, your premium may be higher than someone who's never had a breach. But one of the things that we saw that Beasley was very forthcoming and said, if you don't have some of these safeguards, we will not bind insurance. We will not insure your organization. And the ones that we found, the core 5 here is, do you have endpoint protection, antivirus on all endpoints? Do you have multi-factor authentication for remote access, administrative accounts, and email? Are you providing ongoing security awareness training to employees? Again, focusing on the employee aspect. Are you backing up all critical servers and systems? Can you restore those? And are you using VPNs for all remote access? So again, just looking at that, that these are the core. So if you had a policy last year and you're going for renewal and you're with Beasley and you don't have this, there's a good chance that they will not insure you. And so this is the core. And I would say that based on the fact that almost all the carriers were asking for the exact same, it's pretty safe to say that these are the core. You need to be doing this at the bare minimum. And the other safeguards that they're asking for will probably allow you to get insurance, but your premiums will be much higher. So, it's important to understand what the carriers are asking. And the next point is really important, is you can't just say yes. All right, we have antivirus, sure. We have do we have it on everything? I don't know, but let's just say yes. Are we using MFA? We have it on our firewall and our VPN. Yeah, we have it MFA. Are you training everyone? Well, we bought training and we are, yeah. So it's important to make sure that you are doing what you said you are doing. And it is, if you say that you have email encryption, make sure that email encryption is implemented. If you say you're backing up and you're restoring, and you can restore within 5 hours, make sure that you can do that. And I think the next piece is really important. I don't know if you've heard of the case, the Travelers case, but I think this has major impact. And what happened was there was a manufacturer in Ohio that was a ransomware victim. They put in a claim to Travelers, who they had cyber insurance with, and they wanted to recoup some of the expenses of ransomware attack. Travelers sent in some vendors and did some forensics, and they found that the client did not have MFA on all the systems, even though they said they did. We have MFA throughout the organization. They found that they didn't have it on administrative accounts, and I believe that was the way the ransomware was introduced into the system. So Travelers turned around and said, we are not going to cover this claim. We're going to deny the claim, and because you said you had MFA on all systems and you didn't. The client sued Travelers, and Travelers won. All right, so this is a major case, and I think we'll see a lot more of this, that if you say on an application that you have safeguards in place, and it turns out that you don't, if you say you have encryption on all laptops, and the one laptop that is stolen didn't have encryption, there's a good chance that that organization will not be paid out on that claim, and then the carrier will deny that claim. So, this is something that I think MSPs should be talking to their clients about, that we have to make sure that we're doing what we said on that application. Otherwise, there's a chance that we put a claim in, it won't be covered. So this has a big impact on, think about all the cyber security that you've implemented. Again, if you say you're encrypting your laptops, better make sure that all the laptops are encrypted. You say you have endpoint protection on all systems, they better be on all systems. Otherwise, there's a chance that the claim could be denied. It has a major impact on security awareness training. And you wouldn't think that, okay, well, we said we're training employees, and we're training employees, and that should be pretty simple, but it isn't. All right, and one of the things to think about is, when you have 2,500 partners, you get a lot of feedback, and what we hear from our partners, our BSM partners, are, we believe that we need to train employees, but I can't get employees to log into the portal. I can't get management to force employees to take training, and MSPs get frustrated. I'm buying this or I'm selling this to clients, and I can't get employees trained. But one of the things to think about is, could security awareness training, or the lack of security awareness training, be the cause of a breach? And could that be, a reason a carrier refuses to pay a claim? So I think there's a great opportunity, and I'm going to be specific on security awareness training, but again, you can use the same talking points to client management around other cybersecurity safeguards. But if you have a policy, and you've said, and all 10 of the carriers asked, are you providing security awareness training? 50% said, are you providing phishing simulations or phishing training to employees? If you have employees that have never logged into the portal, or have not taken training, or is not taking a lot of training, they have not logged in the last year and a half, could that be the grounds of a carrier saying that we're not going to pay that because you're not really doing what you said? Just because they have access to training, but they've never been trained, we're not going to pay that claim. And again, remember what I said before, that carriers want to share the risk. They want to make sure that those safeguards are in place to actually lower risk. And if training is a big part of lowering that risk, and employees are not actually being trained, then the carrier is taking on more risk than they think they have. And there's a good chance that could backfire. So this is a very eye-opening conversation. I mean, cyber insurance or any type of insurance helps a business owner sleep at night. If I have a liability, I have insurance to help me. If I have some cyber attack, I have insurance to help me. But if it doesn't actually pay when you put a claim in, is it really helping? So I think this is a great conversation, as opposed to just being frustrated and saying, how do I get these employees to take training? This is a great way of educating client management or a small business owner that we have to do this. We have to be able to prove that what we said we're doing, we're actually doing. Okay, so the next piece that I think is really important in terms of MSPs is subrogation. Right? And I'll read what that means. You may be familiar with it. The substitution of one person or group by another in respect of a debt or insurance claim, accompanied by the transfer of any associated rights and duties. Right? What the hell does that mean? But what this really means is if a client puts in a claim, and they were a ransomware victim, and they put in a claim, it was $50,000 of all expenses, $100,000. The carrier may pay the claim, may pay the client, here's your $100,000 and all of that, but they may turn around and say, who caused this breach? What was the cause of the breach? And obviously, if you're an MSP, you know that potentially, you've implemented technology, you've implemented their safeguards. Could the insurance company turn around and say, I think it was the MSP's fault. They didn't implement what they should have. They didn't secure the client, and we're going to sue the MSP. Or it could be another vendor. We could sue, if it was an accounting firm, and somehow that they caused a breach at one of their clients. They could turn around and sue that other third party and get, try to recoup those funds that they paid out to the client. And if I'm an MSP, which I am, if you're an MSP, you have to worry about this, because you have to be able to cover yourself. And you do that with your managed service agreements. You do that with contracts. But it's something that is, I think, is going to be more and more of a liability. And what happens is, the client puts in a claim, it's paid, subrogation. They start to look at who, did you provide training, or did you provide phishing? What these are the most important things about lowering the chance of breaches. And you didn't do this as an MSP. Could you be liable? And I think even the problem is, if you get that notification from the lawyers for an insurance carrier, it is nerve-wracking, and it takes your time. And the one thing you have to realize is your client. You may say, well, I have great relationships with my clients. They would never sue me. They wouldn't be happy. They don't have any choice. By getting that insurance policy, they have given the carrier the ability to go after third parties that may have caused breaches. So you can have a great relationship. The carrier does not have to ask the client, is it okay to go and sue your MSP? I think that in itself is very frightening, because no matter how good your relationships are, that the carrier could still go after you. So Brad Gross, no relationship to myself. He's very well known in the MSP space. He helps MSPs write their contracts, their managed service agreements, and he had a really interesting podcast. He basically said security awareness training is a must-have. And one of the quotes he had is, if you're not offering security awareness training, then you're not only doing a disservice to your customers, but you could, under some circumstances, be exposed to legal liability. And I think he's hitting on what the problem is. If an employee falls for simulated phishing, and they were not trained, could that be the fault of the MSP? How could you not have provided that training? and I'm sure, everyone out there is going, well, I said I wanted to do it, but my client said, they didn't want it. You have those pieces, but go back to the beginning. Go back to the number one cause of breaches are employee mistakes, right? And carriers want to see companies lower the risk of a data breach. And focusing on employee education and simulated phishing and training is really important. And Brad hits it right, that if you're not providing this to your clients, that I think you're exposing yourself. And if you are providing it and your clients aren't using it, they are exposing themselves to the fact that they may not have a claim paid in the event of a cyber attack. So it's very interesting to understand what the carriers are looking for and what the responsibility of the MSP and what the responsibility of the client is as well. Now, the good news is that Breach Secure Now, we focus on human security. We enable the clients to be able to say, yes, we are providing training. Yes, we are doing simulated phishing. Yes, we are doing dark web monitoring. Yes, we have written policies and procedures. So that's one of the things. BSN could be a major asset. Yes, we're doing security risk assessment, major asset in understanding or implementing those safeguards. And one of the things that we have, which is really could help, is our employee secure score. A very easy way to show that the organization is training employees, because we take training, simulated phishing, dark web monitoring, and we put it as we quantify it, and you can see what employees are being trained, what employees need more. So it's very easy to say we have training and we are doing that training. All right. So with that said, Tom, any additional input to any of those items that I was talking about?
I will tell you, I did a real good job of not speaking while you were talking, and here is all the check marks that I wanted to address you on. If you look at my screen, you can't see me, can you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yes, all right. No, there was a couple things and that I made little slashes that I wanted to speak and didn't. But you did a great job, right? And for us, it's a constant evolving and revolving landscape, right? For cyber insurance, from when, you and I started this venture to going back to we start writing cyber insurance, right? It's changing every day. And you touched on that.
Definitely. Tom, I have some questions, and then what we'll do is we'll open it up to our audience, because I'm sure there's questions as well. But as I mentioned, we all have multiple hats. I mentioned being the CEO of an MSP, of Breach Secure Now, and Inskyber. You also are president of Willow Risk and president of Inskyber, and I think there's some confusion. I always see that on some of the social media posts, and people always say, "Oh, Tom W." And by the way, everybody calls you Tom W because nobody can pronounce Wizbowski. After 15 years, I still struggle with it. But what's the difference between Willow Risk and Inskyber?
So when I started Willow Risk 9 years ago, we are a professional liability insurance broker, right? So what's professional liability? It's E&O insurance, malpractice insurance, right? It's cyber insurance, directors and officers, employee practices liability. So really, we concentrate on all those, we call them professional lines of insurance. Yes, you have your standard business and general liability insurance, but we're protecting professionals, right? And the insurance that goes along with that. And what we really, and I give credit to you when I keep mentioning back in 2008, 2009, when I met you, because we had a very large healthcare book of business. With Willow Risk Advisors, there's a lot of doctors, hospitals, surgery centers, and really got involved in understanding cyber insurance more when the HITECH Act started, right? And then after speaking with you and sort of doing business back and forth for mutual clients over those last 10 years, that's when we formed Inskyber, really. Because it doesn't take us out of our bucket of professional liability. We always did cyber, but we really saw a need from speaking with you and even some of your partners for the MSP market and their clients. So we really wanted to specialize within a division and a separate company with our firm and our professional liability knowledge and relationships to start Skyber, right? So Skyber really just concentrates on that MSP market and the clients they serve and how we can help them, right? So Willow Risk is the professional lines agency, but Skyber really gets more granular in the MSP and their client market.
And we saw that, right? We saw carriers pulling out of the MSP market.
Yep.
We did have insurance, we were helping MSPs, and one of the main carriers said, we don't want to insure MSPs anymore. And, our MSPs and our partners were scrambling around, and we said, we have to help these MSPs because you've said this multiple times, like, while carriers may leave, there's always someone that will jump back in. Someone will take on that risk. And, within Skyber, we've tried to find those carriers that want to help MSPs and their small business clients.
I'd actually like to change our logo a little bit, because I attribute to this, and I tell this story that we saw the market really changing back in even early as 2017, 2018, with carriers starting to get a little bit of nervous of where the market was going. So I like to say there was a burning fire where carriers were running from the fire, and we put these fire jackets on and went in, right? And that's what we did in Skyber, and we found the carriers that would write it, and now we're starting to see that change even now on carriers jumping in, jumping out, and we'll get into that in a little bit.
I said before that I thought cyber liability insurance was a must-have. You don't run a business without general liability, workers' comp. Would you agree that now, or what's your insight, on cyber liability insurance? Can you run a business without it? Are you seeing companies that are saying, I don't think so. I'm not sure I need this. What's your thoughts around, cyber liability insurance and companies running, using it or not using it?
Great question. And again, we talk about this, and we talked about this earlier in this webinar, that it's part of our stack that we sort of talk with every client about, right? Because it's necessary now. Even to those people, when we jump out of that healthcare market, or we jump out of that IT space, well, I don't need cyber insurance. And I gave that example of a contractor, right? Let me tell you something. You still have, we don't worry about PII getting out or PHI, depending what industry you're in. But there's other things where cyber insurance is going to respond that it doesn't. Let's say you're using Excel or Microsoft and that goes down, you can't bill. What are you using for your invoicing? What are you using? We say QuickBooks. Let's say that goes down, right? Any of that stuff after 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 6 hours, depending on what your deductible is with your cyber policy, if you can't invoice or bill or operate, because we're all sort of digitally connected to computers and how we work now electronically, you can't work. That's a cyber claim, right? That's a business interruption claim. We heard so much about business interruption during COVID, right? Of people not being able to open their business due to the pandemic, right? And it was all publicized. But you didn't really, where really the only coverage that would respond was the cyber market. If you can't operate because your system, the software that you're running any individual business, that is a cyber claim. That's where that cyber insurance responds.
Yeah, do you also see that business owners think, oh, my general liability will cover, a ransomware attack or financial fraud, or do they find themselves shocked when they realize that, it won't? That doesn't cover. You need specific cyber liability insurance. Are we still having these conversations with business owners?
Not as frequently as we did in the past, because it's out there now. And we're at the point where everybody knows somebody that something happened, right? And they're starting to say, oh, I didn't know, or my general liability policy didn't cover that, right? So everyone knows somebody. So that's done a great job for us as awareness. But really, it comes on us and brokers like ourselves to sort of have that discussion. But that discussion's easier than it was, just because it's so out there. We hear horror stories. How many emails you get a day that you won the lottery, or you got a fake invoice or something? We're all aware. Though I did get a call from my father the other day on his computer that worried me that he answered an email. But hey, we'll work on that market for the senior citizens. But
so the traditional, there's a lot of these insurtechs, or that technology companies, insurance wrapped around with technology wrapped around it. You can buy online. Some of it has safeguards with it. It does some scanning. Does that affect, or where does traditional brokers, like in Skyber or other traditional brokers, where do the traditional brokers sit versus some of these new automated, short tech type of carriers or brokers that work with carriers? Where's the traditional broker still fit into the equation?
It's an interesting question because, again, we hear things from our MSP partners about, hey, what does Tokyo Marine have, or what does Coalition have, or hey, they're jumping into our space. And the one thing we want to be very careful when we look at that, insurtechs are trying to not reinvent the wheel, but how can they make that wheel more efficient, right? And adjust to where the market is and what the exposure is. And some have done a decent job on that. And that sort of is part of our future. And just like we think about AI, there always has to be someone behind what's going on, because we worried about these insurtechs offering some of these services. Some of them are just a portal that's sitting there that does nothing, right? No one can replace the MSP for what they're doing. I almost, I have such a background in healthcare that I bring this back. I almost look at an MSP as the family practice or the general practitioner. It should be quarterbacking, right? It's quarterbacking everything within your business, because everything is changing with technology, and there's no one better, right, to sort of say, hey, you have to implement these tools, because for us, it's coming down to the tools. So I think insurtechs are constantly trying to adjust to get that edge, because they want to be profitable. They're there to protect you, but they have to be profitable, right? So what's that edge? So I do think it's not going away. There's just going to be this adjustment phase, but you're always going to need the broker to sort of talk, hey, these companies are a right fit for you. The one thing that we try to do, and I don't know if any of you have talked to Mike, who runs a lot of the day-to-day operations for Skyber, but you have to see the right fit of that type of carrier and what they're into for the market segment of that business. Some carriers might like a food manufacturer better than a general office business, and they feel it's been more profitable for them. So again, it's for us, it's sort of adjusting for that insurtech. What do they like? What's their fit? What's their sweet spot with that type of business? What's their revenue? What's their market segment? So I think you get that. And then we work with our MSPs. They're there to give the tools. Like, these are the tools that are needed by that carrier to make it the right fit. So it's gives you the best coverage at the correct price, right? The price that makes sense.
Yeah, and you hit on two major pieces right there. One, making sure that you put the client, whether it's the MSP or the SMB, with the right carrier, based on revenue, based on employees, based on the data, based on the industry. Not all carriers are the same, and there's some that are much better for one vertical than another. So that's one piece. And I think it's really
I will tell you, and not to cut you off because I've been doing a really good job with this so far of not cutting you off, but I give the example, you would just see Flo from Progressive or Jake from State Farm, right? State Farm doesn't write every auto insurance person in the country, or you don't see Flo. Again, they have a segment of the driver population that they like and are more profitable in that piece, just like for insurance carriers with cyber insurance.
So not everything is black and white. Not everything is yes or no answers. There's a lot of show us that you actually are implementing safeguards. So although it may seem cut and dry, it really isn't. And I think a broker could advocate for the client and also can go back and say, this is the things you need to do. Would you agree with that, Tom?
Yeah, it's again, you touched on it a little bit with one of your slides previously. It comes down to controls. But there is and you can't see it, and if I turn my camera around, we'll probably disconnect. But we have a very large, wall hanging thing in our office here. It's our job to tell your story, right? And those days of, hey, I'm going to answer 3 questions, I'm going to spin out a cyber quote, are over, right? They ended a couple years ago, and there were a few companies that sort of hung around. But really, it's coming down to the controls you're implementing. And for the broker, really to tell the story about the client, you just hit on it, right? It's not just, I'm doing these 5 things, or hey, we did have a breach. But let's tell this story from a quantitative versus qualitative point of view, right? And we talk about two different forms of underwriting. What happened? What did you do to rectify it? What are you doing now? What has changed? So again, if we do that, we're going to find that right fit, and the carrier understands what you're doing.
All right, so last question, and then Tracy, I know you're all queued up. So premiums, they went up a lot last year. You know, some carriers were doubling premiums, some were 200 times the premium. What are you seeing in the future, Tom? What are you seeing now? What are you seeing? Where are we going with premiums?
So what we've seen, and we had a meeting this morning in our office, really is some, and I'm going to say this, like some sort of stability where we're not cringing when we get that first renewal 90 days out and sort of going back and negotiating. We're seeing 5%, 10%, 2%, $2 we had one, right? So again, it's all going to come down to the revenue that how's an insurance company justifying exposure for a client of yours, right? They take revenue and controls, right? So the revenue stayed the same and your controls are sort of at industry standard and better. We're getting renewals that aren't too bad, right? I think we're seeing a little bit of stabilization, and I hope we keep trending that way, and we'll see. There's a lot of other factors that'll go on that with how the market's doing and everything else, but for right now, it's been okay. It's been manageable. So I feel like everything costs more money, right? All right. We're doing
all right.
okay.
Well, Tracy, I think we have 10 more minutes. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'll mention a couple questions. You have quite a few. If you don't mind, just a housekeeping component. This webinar is recorded, and there are several questions. And if we don't get to those, we'll ensure that we get an answer to those attendees that ask these questions, outside of the webinar. So, but you actually were just covering a point that segues into a great first question. And that question is, can the coverage, typically be adjusted or expanded as new cyber risks emerge? Are you seeing that as a possibility?
So what we are seeing, there are times in our deck that I jump too quick here to answer this question.
Right.
Where we're seeing that are changing, right? When you renew a policy, that policy terms and condition renew unless something changes. So where we're changing mid-term, mid-policy, let's say an MSP gains a potential new contract with, and I'm going to use a Merck or a huge hospital system, and saying, hey, I can't have my $1 million limits anymore. In order to take this contract on, I have to have a $5 million limit. I have to have social engineering clauses at this. So at those times, we go in and we sort of work with the MSP or the client to say, hey, what changed in that contract? And either we'll make that adjustment with the carrier to do like a contract specific endorsement into the policy, or just change the policy altogether. And again, that's us working with the carrier to do that. So the only time we see changes is a contractual way. Sometimes and it's a little bit different if a client comes to us, hey, I need $5 million limits, can we adjust it tomorrow? The insurance carrier is saying, hey, what happened? We have a breach coming on. So again, it's us, and again, I'm going back to telling the story, what caused that? What is it? If it's not a contract, why are you feeling that?
Yeah, and I think we're seeing carriers become very reactive. You hear about a breach, of maybe a software vendor. Within a month, they're starting to ask the questions. Are you using this software? Are you, we're very concerned. Where in the past, carriers were very slow to react, but they're tuned in right now. And as things change, carriers are changing quickly as well.
Well, especially within technology, it's no more being an ostrich and putting your head in the sand. We have to react now, right? And many, many years ago, Progressive did a great study. And this is before, and I mentioned flow, but in the very beginning when Progressive first came out, we're talking about 20 years ago, they would go to an accident and try to settle a claim right there. Because they did studies, the quicker you jumped on something, right, the less it was paid out or it was handled, compared to, hey, let's stick our hand in the sand.
All right, what's next, Trace?
All right. So this one's kind of relative to Breach Secure Now in particular. On our, when we're talking to the MSP community, we talk a lot about annual training, annual security awareness training, and ongoing security awareness training. And we know typically, that 30% of SMBs are actually providing annual training to their end users, which is horrifying and breaks my heart a little bit. But this question is relative to, what percentage do you see insurance requiring security awareness training on an ongoing versus annual basis? Because it sounds like this partner in particular is experiencing pushback from their buyer, their SMB, saying, it's not required for my insurance company, and they are, delegating between annual and ongoing. So do you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, you don't see those guidelines. They don't get granular. But the truth is, if you're training someone in January, there's a good chance that they're not going to remember that in November. I mean, they just won't. If you're not providing phishing is the leading cause of data breaches. If you're not providing phishing training, phishing simulation, are you actually helping lower the risk? Again, the real question should be, insurance carriers want clients to lower risk. If you're providing annual training but don't provide anything ongoing, you can't consume all that information and remember it throughout the year. If you're not doing simulated phishing, if you're not, if you're not putting security in the forefront of that employee, are you actually lowering the risk? And there's a chance that the carrier will say, no, you're not. You're an annual training, it's 1990s, right? You go into a conference room and train employees and be done. I don't think that is sufficient. And again, it gets down to liability. If you put a claim in and the carrier comes back and says, we don't think annual training is enough, we're denying your claim. Now, your only recourse is to sue the carrier. Then you're fighting them. It's like, so in a way, it gets back to, how do you truly lower risk? By ongoing training, by simulated phishing, by understanding dark web, risks. So I think, I know everybody wants, like, oh, is it really required? I would say it is. I would say ongoing training and is required, and it's your best chance of being able to go back to the carrier and say, we've provided this ongoing training, the simulated phishing. So when it's a gray area, I would lean more to the safety of being able to say, we are doing more than what the minimal, because we are truly trying to lower that risk.
That's a great point. Yes, thank you. The next question, and I'm going to rush through a couple of these if you don't mind, is, how often would you recommend either testing or having conversations about these practices being put into place to make sure you're in compliance? Is this a yearly conversation, every month or so? What would you recommend?
Well, one thing is, you can no longer wait until the renewal. It used to be, and Tom, I think you'll agree with this, it used to be, you're December, you're going for renewal, you start looking at it in November, because you really, you're going to get the coverage. It's just a matter of what is the premium. Now, these applications there could be 40 more questions than there were last year. And there's a chance that even if you had insurance last year, when you're going for your renewal, you're not going to be renewed because you don't have the new cybersecurity safeguard. So I think it's very important to be talking about this throughout the year, to be making sure that you're looking at renewals 2 or 3 months out or before to make sure that if there is new requirements, you have enough time to implement it. It isn't like, oh, we need an EDR, let's go roll this out in the next 2 weeks. I mean, it takes planning, it takes pieces. So I think these conversations should happen throughout the year. I think I've always said that cyber insurance sells cybersecurity. It's a way to educate clients that they need to invest in cybersecurity, and so I would say that throughout the year you should be discussing it with clients.
Great. And I think that's a powerful component to the employee secure score at Breach Secure Now. Kind of it empowers that end user, that employee, to continuously be engaged every day in their own security postures.